Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In today's video we're going through my round 14 AFL tips for 2025, but first of all, as always, let's see how we did last week. So yeah, look, I guess you could say I did alright this week. I ended up getting the 4 out of the 8 and we started off on the Thursday night between the Dogs and the Hawks, and I'm really annoyed at myself. I went with the Hawks, as you know, but I changed it when I knew that when I knew that the Bulldogs had Treloar coming back in. I changed it. Exact same thing I did last year. I tipped the Bulldogs, I tipped the Hawks, then changed it to the Bulldogs. Exact same thing happened last year. The exact same thing happened to me this year. I'm so annoyed. This game haunts me. I always tend to change my tip to the Bulldogs. Next time I'm tipping the Hawks against the Bulldogs, I'm changing it because the Dogs, yeah, they were really disappointing. And how about the Hawks responding? Still annoyed at myself. Should have just stuck with Hawthorn. I went with the Crows in a close one over the Lions. Ended up getting a result there in a bit of a low scoring one. It was actually quite a low scoring round. Went with the Tigers in a bit of an upset. That just didn't end up happening. I think they only kicked one goal in the last 3 quarters, the Tigers. Yeah, look, Sydney, it was a good response because they need that to just keep a little pulse in this season. I did go with the Cats by about 44. It was a much closer game than that. Again, another low scoring one. And then again, another low scoring one, but a bit more of an upset here with Port Adelaide getting the result over the Giants. I went with the Giants there. The Power actually won that one. Then I went with the Eagles against North and kind of wanted them to win that game so that we wouldn't be the only team that had lost to the Eagles so far. And they were looking good, but they just couldn't kick straight, the Eagles. And yeah, look, the damage was really done in the first quarter for North. They had a good start, but the Eagles in the second and third quarter played much better despite them just inaccurate kicking down at hands. But North ended up coming back and winning the game there, so I get nothing in that. Then I got the correct scoreline and the correct tip for the Carlton Essendon game. I went the Blues one in a close one. That was a good one. And then the best game of the round was the Pies and the D's. Just after recording this, just happened, and yeah, the Pies ended up holding on by a point. So I do get the result there, but not the correct scoreline. It was a much closer game, and yeah, look, a really good game there to finish off at the G. So let's get into the tips. We do start off round 14 at Marvel, where we do have the Saints taking on the Dogs here. Now, the Saints, they're coming fresh off the bye, and obviously the Dogs have already had their bye in round 12. So, look, the Dogs, they were in some pretty good form over these last 2 weeks, but they've let a couple of games slide. Respectable loss to the Cats, but you really feel like they should have beaten the Hawks just with their Treloar being back in. But yeah, I shouldn't have changed my tip to the Hawks in the end, as I just said. I could see the Hawks responding, and that's exactly what happened. So I think it was more of a Hawks response, but the Bulldogs just couldn't apply any pressure to the Hawks. They made the Hawks look like them old selves, which they were, but yeah, the Bulldogs, they just couldn't really get any pressure in that first quarter going, really, and they just allowed too many scoring shots for the Hawks, and in the end, the Hawks' efforts there paid off, so that's pretty disappointing for the Dogs. So the Saints, obviously, as I just said, they are coming off the bye, fresh off a win in Alice Springs, so that was good for the Saints' sake because there is still a pulse in their season, as kind of like Sydney, Carlton, Port Adelaide, Melbourne at the moment. If they can win this game, they're kind of back in the hunt still to make the 8. They'll be 6 and 7, and the Bulldogs will also be 6 and 7 if they do end up losing this game. As a Saints fan, I really do want to tip my Saints here because the Bulldogs, they're not in the best form, and they'll be wanting to win this game. Otherwise, the pressure's going to lean back towards Bevo. They've got all their injuries back. You feel like they should be winning this game because earlier on in the season, they did obviously thump the Saints by 71 points. I do want to tip the Saints here, my Saints, but unfortunately, I just think the Dogs will be too strong. They bet us by 71 points and I backed us in last time. I think it will be a much closer game, and it should be a much closer game between these two teams, but I'm going to go the Dogs here in a 14-point win under the roof at Marvel on the Thursday night. We head over to Utah's now, where we have the Hawks and the Crows on the Friday night. A pretty interesting Friday night fixture here down in Launceston. Can't remember the last time there was a Friday night game being played here, but the Hawks, well, they got a much needed win just to maintain in the 8. They are 8 and 5, so again, the good thing, as I said, is that they are ahead of the 8 ball. They are 3 games ahead of the 8 ball, so they're 8 and 5. As for the Crows, well, they're flying right now. You know, you could arguably put them in your top 4 for premiership favourites because they're just flying, and you could argue that they really should have lost that game against Brisbane because Brisbane had a few butchered chances late, and you feel like if they had have just capitalized on one goal, they would have won the game. But credit to the Crows, their pressure was still good throughout the game, and It was a low scoring game, one of the more lowest scoring thrillers, but you take that when it's a thriller. But yeah, do you feel like the Lions probably threw away some chances there? But the Crows, they did what they needed to do, and at the end of the day, they pick up the 4 points. So I think this should be another good game here on the Friday night. Okay, this is where the Hawks might just start winning some more games now. They'll get some of their injuries back for this game, and that's the win they needed. But I'm slightly leaning towards a bit of an upset, you could say. I do think the Hawks are favoured in this game, and it's down at UTAS, but I feel like the Crows actually play decently at UTAS, and I'm just going to go them in a slight upset. I feel like they've been slightly better than the Hawks this year, and they'll be wanting to win this game away, which would pretty much already just lock them in for finals. I think they're almost a lock for finals, but if they can win this game down in UTAS, I think they're a certain lock, and I'm going to go them here in a bit of an upset. I'm going to say the Crows to pull it off and win down in UTAS by 13 points. We head over to the Gabba now, where we do have the Lions taking on the Giants, and we'll start off with the Giants, obviously, because, yeah, look, they were just disappointing on the weekend, really, when you look at it. It's hard to really tell where they are at, because you look, one week they look like a premiership contender, and now the next week they just don't really look like they can really make finals with the way that they play in some games. They just went back to being fumbly, and Port Adelaide, they were just much better around the ground, and they gave a bit of a response. But yeah, the Giants, they've never really been around the mid-table in their history, but this is one of those years where they're starting to linger around mid-table, kind of like 2020, even though that was a shortened season. But yeah, look, the Giants, it's just really hard to get a read on them, because you just never know. They could still come to the Gabba and win here, and we'll move over to the Lions, and well, they were pretty disappointing. They just couldn't convert on some chances late. You know, some of their stars like Lockie Neal, Starcevic, Hipwood missed a couple just in front of goal. I think they had at least 6 or 7 as more scoring shots than the Crows, something around that mark. But they just couldn't. They just couldn't put it in front of goals, and the Crows ended up winning that game. And you feel like if they could have won that game, they still would have maintained a good spot in the top 2. And look, I definitely could see the Giants responding here and getting the victory. I think the Giants, same spot around the last year when the Giants were in some pretty poor form, but they came back at the Gather. They were down by 30 points or something in the first quarter, and they ended up coming back to win. And they can still certainly play on the road, and I think they will need to win this game. Otherwise, their season is just really a mixed bag to tell if they're going to make finals or not. But surely at home, you'd think Brisbane should be just too strong here. I reckon the Lions, they just should be far too strong, as I said, because they're at home. So I'm going to back them in here. I'm going to say the Lions to win by 25 points. We move over to the G, where we do have Essendon taking on the Cats. Now, the Cats, they're one of the more informed teams in the comp after a little bit of shaky form before those 4 wins. But yeah, look, they're just finding their groove. And credit to them still getting the result down to GMHBA. I know that they always just play good footy there. GMHBA, that's just an expectation. But they were without Bailey Smith. And they even had one of their best players go out mid-game. I forgot who that was. But yeah, look, they're just flying at the moment. So Bailey Smith will also be coming back for this game, obviously off that tendon Achilles rupture there. But as for the Bombers, well, they've lost a couple in a row, as expected. I just think when you look at this season, the Bombers, they're always a chance to make the A, and they still could, but I think this is where they might just tank and just go for the draft picks here, because I just feel like against the Cats, the Cats should just be too strong coming into this game. Now, it is at the G, but in recent history, Essendon played really poorly against Geelong. I think they got up against them in the preseason, but before that, I don't think they've even beaten the Cats in the last 6 years or something like that. So it's definitely not a good record for the Bombers. And I can remember last year, the Cats, they are in some poor form. There were quite a few people tipping the Bombers. Essendon were in some good form, and the Cats, they absolutely came out and demolished the Bombers at the G. So I kind of just see the Cats doing that again. I just think they're a much better side. They should be making a top 4 finish with their fixture coming up, and they'll be wanting to win this game. You can't always count out the Bombers, because you never know. They could show up, but I'm going to go the Cats in a big win here at the G by 34 points on the Saturday. We head over to Optus now, where we have North Melbourne, their home game. They're actually playing in Perth, obviously signed with the 3-year deal where they do play 2 home games in WA, one being at Hans Oval and this one being at Optus. And it's probably going to be a weird atmosphere, because you'd still expect way more Freo supporters to show up to this game. But the North MC is going to be at this game. So it's a North home game. It's at Optus. I mean, it benefits all teams here. And yeah, look, we have North taking on Freo. And Look, even though it's a North home game, they still technically are away, but not away. And we start off with the Dockers. So the Dockers, they're in some really good form at the moment. 3 wins in a row, and the bar just kind of helps them, but doesn't help them. Helps them because they get an extra week of rest to help out with their good form. But they are in some good form, so now's not really the time that they need the bye. As for the Rose, look, you just feel like. Yes, they won the game, but there's still plenty of disappointing moments. The way that they were just so fumbly against an Eagles side who were like at least 2 or 3 years below in their rebuild. I just thought it was disappointing. They didn't deserve to win that game. West Coast could have been up by as much as 36 in that game. So it does annoy me because I did tip West Coast, so maybe I'm a bit salty there. But the Rose, look, credit to them, they just got the 4 points. But I could definitely see them coming out to play here because 2 years ago, if you remember at Optus, North Melbourne did win the last game here against Freo at Optus by a point back in 2023. So maybe the Roos could come out here for a bit of an upset. They might be also lifted because it is their home game, but look, you'd expect the Dockers to show up in this game. They're in some good form, and if they can win this, their run is coming up is not only good because they're playing some poor opponents, but most of their games are actually at home as well. So I think the Dockers would want to be taking full advantage here. I could definitely see them winning by a lot. I think North will be in it though for most of the game. I just feel like the Roos, they're a bit more matured side now away from home. It's their home game, so they want to put up a good effort to maintain in WA. So I'm going to go the Dockers here by 27 points at Optus. We head over to the Adelaide Oval now for the second last game of the round where we have the Power and the D's coming over. Now the D's obviously just playing a couple hours ago in the King's birthday clash against Collingwood. They went down by 1 point and yeah, look, they just couldn't really kick straight. They had a couple of moments that they butchered, but geez, what a game that was. And unfortunately, the big skipper, Max Gawn, I guess you could say cost them, but not cost them the game. There were 28 seconds left, and they were down in the back half, and Gawn obviously turned it over with his kick. But I feel like that's just Collingwood's just shows that they are a better side at the moment, and I think that they'll be looking at that and blaming not just Gawn, but pretty much everyone because yeah, look, they let themselves down kicking in front of goal. And as for the Power, well, again, their season is slightly still a pulse. You still feel like one of those sides that aren't in form. You could just see them going on a run. You've got sides like Sydney, Carlton, Port Adelaide. You could just see one of those sides really going on a run and going on a fairy tale run and making it to the eight. So could Port Adelaide do that? I'm not sure, but you look at this game back at the Adelaide Oval. They're playing the D's, who have lost a couple, who previously looked pretty strong, but the D's, I just think their season's still right off at the moment. I can't see them making the eight, but the Power, I mean, they should be winning this game at the Adelaide Oval. I think the D's won this fixture here last year at the Adelaide Oval, but I think Port at home, I'm just going to go them. If they can win this, there's still a slight chance. There's still a pulse. So I'm going to go the Power. They should be winning this game. I think it's going to be a very good game, though. I'm going to go Port Adelaide in this one by 11 points back at home. And the last game of the round back at Optus now. 2 games here for Optus this round. We have the Eagles and the Blues. Now, the Eagles, look, they're only 1 win this season, obviously being against the Saints. And I feel like against the Roos, they really should have just won that game. They had so many chances they butchered late. I remember even watching it. I think they had 1 goal 13, which is absolutely, yeah, that's just not good enough. And I get it's at Hans Oval, where it is a very local ground, so it's very windy. But you feel like they could have won that game against Hawthorn. They probably should have. And but it doesn't matter. They've still got a win for their season. As to the Blues, well, their season isn't going too well at the moment, but they did get the result over the Bombers. Look, they probably deserved to win. They came out of the blocks chopping, and geez, it was really that third quarter that let them down. They really let the Bombers back into the game, which they have been able to do. They've just let sides back in the games in second halves of this year, Carlton, but they were able to close it out, and they probably were the better side at the end of the day, not just early, but you feel like throughout the match. So the Blues, look, this should be really a game that they should be winning, and maybe the Eagles at home again. They did lose their last one here to the Cats, but maybe they could pull off what they did against the Saints. But I think the Blues. This is just an obvious tip. The Blues. You look at their run. They've got a lot of games, kind of like Freo, at home, and some of their opponents they're playing are really poor. I think they've got Richmond and North still to come. I think they've got North next week actually. So after this game. So I think they'll want to be winning this. I think the Blues, they should be too strong. I'm going to go the Blues in this one by 36 points at Optus. So those are my tips for the round 14. Let me know if you agree or disagree with me in the comments, and we'll see you in the next video.